Oh, there you are. Hi, I'm Clayfect, and today I was thinking we were going to make a little baby Yeti. True to this baby monster series, I'm going to sculpt the Yeti baby and tell you a bit about them. Now, like with many other baby monsters, there are so many different interpretations of this monster. So this is the Clayfect view on how this winter baby monster actually should look like. So let's get started. Now right off the bat, as I'm building the armature, I know I want to go the ape way when it comes to the Yeti, simply because that's how it is mostly described. But since I decided to go the ape way, I run into a bit of a problem, because if I don't find any other features to symbolize the Yeti, then it will basically just be a white ape, and that's not Yeti-ish enough for me. So later on you are going to see me curse and swear at myself, because I have decided that a texture is the way fluid. So that is why you're not only going to see me building up his butt and his muscles, but also going to see me put a lot of small bumps on him. You can say it's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride, but the reason for the bumps that's going to come later is because I want the fur to be as puffy as possible, almost like snow. Taking a bit from the Yeti from Monsters Inc. actually. Now, for those of you who has been following me for a while, might remember the texture I gave the moss to the forest spirit, and it's pretty much the same thing. Only this time it's not patches of moss. No! And the moss! I decided to scrape from side to side and make the whole sculpture in this very infuriating texture. Now, while I'm torturing myself both mentally and physically, this texture is so hard on your hands. Why don't I tell you a bit about the Yeti? Though before I get started, a quick disclaimer, guys. I am not an expert in frozen or ice-like monsters at all. I'm simply a girl with Google. So please don't come after me. Now, let me tell you about the Yeti. Legends of this tall, white, furry fluff ball has gone from mouth to mouth since the 1800s. It has many names, like the Yeti, the Abominable Snowman, and even the golden monkey from Nepal and Tibet. It is known to live way up in the Asian mountains, the Himalayas to be more precise, where some climbers and hikers claim to have seen the creature. Now I would like to take a little break, showing you the beautiful Christmas tree Mr. Clayfect has made me. I think he's such a talented glacier, and I'm so proud of him, so I had to share this with you. Now, back to the Yeti. Many mountain climbers claimed to have seen bone piles the Yeti has put there, or even feces from the Yeti. Some even claim to have seen the Yeti, but no proof has yet been found. Throughout time, many expeditions has been made to find proof of the Yeti, but so far none of them were successful. Until 2008, where a research team claimed to find a footprint of the Yeti. But no solid evidence has yet been found. People that claims the Yeti exists believes that it is a descendant from the orangutan, and believe that it is in the family with Bigfoot and the Australian Yowie. And that is pretty much it what I know about the Yeti. Now, if the Yeti is real or not, I really don't want to say, because this channel is about mystery and magical things, and I don't think we should ruin that. So the only thing I will say on this topic is, at least there's one Yeti. the one we are making right now. So let's get back to the sculpture and back to the face that I'm building at this point. I'm slowly building up the face because this is my first monkey-ish sculpture, so I have to admit I really had no idea what I was doing. But I had fun doing it anyway. Besides the texture, the biggest problem I had with this sculpture was definitely the nose. I just couldn't get it quite ape-like. So I used a lot of time fiddling around just to make it look sort of ape Yeti-ish. I don't think it looks like a Yeti yet, but we're getting there. Now in my opinion, the Yeti gotta love snow, right? Otherwise, it must be a very, very depressed creature. So that is why I had decided to make our little Yeti sit down and looking fascinated at a snowflake, just like it's the first time he ever has been out of the safety of the cave, and now just stare in awe of the white fluffy stuff around him. Speaking of fluffy, don't you think that would be a fitting name for him? Yeah, I think Fluffy will be a wonderful name for our little guy. I don't know if it's a very, very manly name, but hey, you gotta respect a guy that calls Fluffy, come on. And here I finally figure out what's wrong with the nose, which is why I decided to chop off some of the nose to make it more flat and monkey-like. Now, even though it would be cute, it's actually not a Christmas hat I'm giving him here. No, I'm building up his skull to make him more gorilla-like and make him a little bit different. With his skull finally as I wanted, you see me giving him some stripes on top of the head. And it's actually to make what I call a phantom effect, you can say. So when I give it some texture, it actually looks like some long hair. Now, of course, of all the things I forgot to record, it was the ears. I have like 8 hours of me making texture and fluffy fur, but I forgot the ears. So that is why you only see me blending the ears in here. I gave our little guy slightly pointy ears and some horns, all in hope of making him less ape monkey-like and more like a Yeti. And I have to say, I think that helped a lot. Well, that and the texture, of course. Now, while I give our little guy some more texture and start working on the legs, why don't I tell you about the Yeti flu Clayfect eyes? Now, beside the traditional horror stories there of course is, I don't see any evidence that the Yeti actually is evil or is a human murderer. But, logically speaking, if it is an ape, then it's also an omnivore, and there can't be much food to find on top of the mountains. So maybe they eat a hitchhiker now and then. But in my opinion, if people are willing to risk their life and freeze their butt off only to look at a pretty view, then I think it's sort of fair game for the Yeti to get a snack now and then. That doesn't make them evil, that just means they're hungry. Now when it comes to our boy Fluffy here, if he had to choose between eating the buttocks of a frozen hitchhiker or some grapes, I have no doubt that he will choose the grapes. If for no other reason than not to get hair in his food. I actually think that our boy has bigger dreams. He wants to taste grapes. He wants to see a coconut. He loved the beach because he saw it on a postcard from a frozen hitchhiker. Before him and his family slowly ate the poor guy. And that's pretty much it what I know about Fluffy and his man-eating family. Now you're probably wondering why I cut the toes off and placed them again, and it's fairly simple. I had for some reason got it into my head that the apes foot thumb thingies were on the outside of the foot and not the inside. So when we did that, before I started giving the feet some details, and with the toes finally placed correctly and the feet done, I gave the little guy some more texture. Now this type of texture is actually pretty wonderful and pretty horrible at the same time. The reason it's wonderful is because it's very, very easy to make. You just have to script the clay in whichever way you want. The only rule is that you shouldn't scrape in any kind of pattern. It is also a very universal texture, you can say. If you want to make grass, or if you want to make snow or moss, you can use this type of texture because it sort of just looks like a puffy mess. Now the bad thing about this texture is that it's not forgiving at all, meaning if you just as much as graze it, you're going to flat out the puffiness and have to redo that area all over again. That and the fact that all those small micro movements you're going to make, especially if you decide to make a whole sculpture with this texture, will take a toll on your hands. So in that way, this texture is less than ideal, you can say. Don't get me wrong, I am so happy with the outcome. So I would choose this texture again, but making hands and making feet was a bit of an ice break, I have to say. There was a lot of sighing and maybe even a little bit of crying when I had to texture the arms. The arms were definitely the hardest. But while I did that, I had also given Mr. Clayfect some homework. You might remember that I talked about I wanted Fluffy to look at a tiny snowflake. And of course I thought that Mr. Clayfect was just the right guy to get me that tiny snowflake. So that is what you see my lovely husband doing here, creating the tiniest of tiny snowflakes in 3D, only to later on print it out in resin. And the reason I decided to call upon Mr. Clayfect here is because I couldn't make a tiny and pretty enough snowflake. Simple as that. Sometimes you need another tool. And my biggest and greatest tool is Mr. Clayfect and his knowledge of technology. I am so grateful for his help. I have no idea how many times he had to try and retry to get a tiny snowflake right, but I am pretty impressed by him. And while he played around with resin, I was finally done with our little Yeti guy. Look at him! Isn't he just the cutest fluff ball you ever seen? Now with him done and the snowflake on its way, all I had to do was paint him. Thankfully, Fluffy's paint job was fairly easy. I started painting him in a watered down white to get into all the nooks and crannies, before I painted him in another white that was a little bit more bluish, also watered down, only to finish up the fur with a slightly pearlescent shine. Now the camera had some problems picking up the pleasant shine. Speaking of camera problems, if you thought the light was weird in some of the clips of this sculpture, that's because of the weird camera wizard that plays tricks on us sometimes. Now, for Fluffy's face, I decided to go with a grayish blue that I used on the hands as well. First, however, I gave it a bit of a shading with another grey bluish color, just to give it a little more dimension. That is also why I put all those different kind of white on the fur, simply to make Fluffy puff some more, you can say. As I said, the paint job was fairly easy, but easy doesn't mean that I didn't give it a lot of thought, maybe too much. Because if I just paint him bluish, grey and white, then the character would become very flat and lose a lot of dimension. Now for the nails, I used the same color as I used for the horns, and that was a bluish metallic color. The reason I decided to use it for all the nails and the horns was to bring the character more together and to give it a bit more of a shine. Now I apologize for the very overpainted hands. I simply can't help myself. But here you see the tiny snowflake Mr. Clayfect has made. And if you look closely, you can even see me painting it. I am such a messy artist, guys. My deepest apologies. But with the snowflake painted, all I had to do was put it on with some super glue before I cleaned out his eyes. And with his eyes clean, I think that is pretty much it for this sculpture and it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked little Fluffy here. I am definitely a fan of him. I just love the pose and the little snowflake. It makes the world of difference. And I actually think that even though he is sort of ape-like, he does look like a Yeti. And I would vow that I would never use this texture again, but come on guys. You know me, apparently I am a sucker for punishment. Though I do think it paid off in this case. Now with that being said, it is time for me to sign off. I hope to see you next time, but if you can wait until next time, why not click on the square to your right? Then you're going to see Jack Skeleton from The Nightmare Before Christmas get made. As a baby, with a Christmas hat, on a swing. What's not to like? But until then, bye!